morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This is Paul Sisler, and this is In the Moment. Today on Comedy and Controversy, my co-host here, Jeremy Baker, we have a special guest today. Jeremy, how are you doing today?
I'm okay. Survived another day. Actually, I made it through another week without slapping the shit out of somebody, so I'd say it's a win.
Definitely a win. Definitely
Day's
a
not
win.
over yet, though, so you never know.
Yes. So today, our special guest via phone is Jerry Hamza. He was the personal manager of George Carlin for over 35 years and a longtime friend of Mr. Carlin. And he's here with us today. Jerry, hello. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Doing good. So I hear that you have won an Emmy for, I believe it's The American Dream for George Carlin.
Yeah, we won an Emmy and we're very proud of it. And as executive producer, I had to put it together. And I'm very pleased that I picked people that were good in themselves or could bring people with them. One of the fellows directed, Judd Apatow, he was a star. He did 40-year-old version. He's got a couple of movies, and his future is wide open. And Teddy Leifer, another guy who has an office in London, he produced it, and he was terrific. So we're just happy with all the people on it, and we're happy with winning the Emmy. It's the first time we were ever up for one, so we got it.
Congratulations.
It's always nice to knock off Lucille Ball.
All right.
One thing I wanted to say to Mr. Hamza is I truly respect what you did, not even for so long, but I think people need to understand that this was all before the internet and social media. So your work was exponentially more difficult getting a hold of people, setting things up. I mean, you literally had to do the legwork. And I think people need to understand.
Let me my speaker up a little. Yeah, I'm having a little trouble. How are you?
Doing all right.
How are you? Can you hear me okay?
Go ahead. I'm all right now.
I said I wanted to just say to people out there that I respect what you did, just because people need to understand that obviously what you did was before social media and the internet, and you literally had to do the legwork for 35 years. I mean, you made calls. You literally went out and about and made things happen to help with these productions. You didn't just sit in your office and send a bunch of emails out. I mean, you literally had to do the work in order for, behind the scenes, in order for George Carlin to have been successful. I mean, you're an integral part of that, and I respect that.
Well, you should know. I know this from my dad, who was a promoter before me. He was never a manager or producer or anything, but he was a promoter. Comedy didn't used to draw. You couldn't draw flies with it. He had 2 days on the Jack Benny Show, which was a #1 radio show in the country. And he had all the people that went with him, Dennis Day and Wilson and so on. And he lost his ass. He paid $10,000 for the show and lost $10,000. So it was hard to get an audience for country music. And that started to change in the middle 60s. In the middle 60s, all these cities started popping up with 24-hour-a-day full-time country music. So I would get on the phone with general managers to come, 6 months before they open, and I'd lock up a deal with them where we presented the shows, and they got all the kind of publicity they wanted. The DJs walking on stage and introducing themselves and everything else. But country music was dead. As far as comedy was nothing either. There was no, there wasn't much. These were weak fields. You know, I mean, it was Elvis Presley, Little Richard, rock and roll that was jumping around in those days. It was definitely not, you know, Ernest Tubb.
Yeah.
And it wasn't any of the other comedians you could think about. But then George, and I guess late 69, maybe early 70, put out some albums that went through the roof. And that's what's really, in my mind, started comedy as a real acceptable venture and a hot commodity. And ever since then, it hasn't slowed down.
No, it hasn't. I mean, now you have like your Netflix and stuff like that that's got just tons of comedy specials. It's awesome, and there's a lot of new uprising comedians out there. But I go back more old school, where Jeremy and we've talked about this, where he's more up to date with a lot of the newer ones, and me, I go back to a lot of the older ones and all that, where obviously George Carlin being my favorite, Richard Pryor, Gene Wilder, Lucille Ball, Joan Rivers, Lily Tomlin. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on.
And I think
I asked George once, what he used to like to do was to fly to Boston and then rent a car and do 3 dates that we could drive to. He used to like that because he could come down after a show and we'd shoot the breeze and come up with some funny stuff. You know, a guy will show his tail after a show better than if he's all uptight. And I asked him once, I said, George, you got all these comedy clubs and all these different guys. And I hate comedy clubs, by the way. Only reason I hate racetracks, too. You got to wait 30 minutes. And you might not see anything. It's over in 2 minutes. And comedy clubs were the same thing. They would be, you'd have some guy that maybe had 5 good minutes, and then it would be tortured. And I asked George, the fact that they have so many new guys trying it, is that going to increase the name of headliners of, stars? And he said, no. They only come along so many times, whether it's me or Richard Carlin, Richard Pryor, or Steve Martin, whoever they are, they only come across so many times, and they can put 6,000 acts in those clubs, and nothing's going to happen. And if you notice, most of the comedians in the clubs, lucky they have 20 minutes. George, for instance, was very prolific. Look at all the albums. He would have material waiting for another show when he got done with the first one. That's not the way it is. I mean, a lot of those guys ought to just go and become school teachers or accountants because it ain't going to happen.
Yes, I've always wanted to do stand-up comedy personally. I just never had the opportunity. Where I live, it's a really small city, and we don't even have a comedy club. But I think what differentiates great comics from just comics is comics tell jokes, where great comics tell stories, and they make controversial topics not only relevant but funny and understandable in ways that you wouldn't be able to have in a normal conversation with somebody. And I think George Carlin was the legend when it came to talking about controversial topics. And me and Paul talk about it all the time, about how the stuff he said 30, 40 years ago is still relevant today, if not even more relevant today than when he said it.
Yep.
Well, the funny thing has been that we have picked up more awards, all-time awards, in the last 5 years than we ever did before that, because people realize, and they know the audiences of how much he accomplished. George's big thing was language.
Mm-hmm.
He hated that anybody would close him down. He didn't understand what they thought the words were going to do to people. And it finally came around to where people that ever listened to George Carlin understood where he stood on language. And by the way, I had as a manager, 1 million chances over the years to sell him out. He wouldn't go for it. In other words, I had a company in Canada wanted to run a special. And he says, just the manager up there, he says, listen, we'll give you $1 million if we can run them specials for a year, but you got to eliminate some of the language. And I went to George, and he said, "Stuck
them." You gotta respect somebody that turns down $1 million because
the guy called me again, and he says, "Listen, we'll do the deal with you. There's only one word he can't use." What do you think it was?
The F word?
cunt.
Nope.
Cunt? Cunt.
Yep. That's still, even today, that's still.
I went back to George and I told him, and he laughed. He said, "No, I ain't doing it." So eventually they agreed, and we used all the 7 words. And it was Bravo in Canada. There was a Bravo in Canada as well as the United States, and they did real well. It went through the roof. But I just thought it was funny. It's funny to hear somebody say, "We're going to throw $1 million contract down the drain over using one word."
Wow.
It's funny you say that because remember the story with Dave Chappelle, who he literally walked away from $50 million over differences. You know what I mean? He literally said, I couldn't believe it, but Dave Chappelle literally walked away from $50 million. And everybody thought he was crazy, but he was like, "Look, I am who I am, and I'm not going to change for anyone." And
exactly.
You have to respect that kind of commitment to your craft.
Yes. I definitely respect that. And again, George Carlin, he was a pioneer in a multitude of ways. So, Mr. Hamza, do you have any good, funny stories that the people just don't know about with you and George?
Well, I can remember breaking down on the road in a rental car and having to hop fences and walk a mile to a concert.
That's commitment.
When I started with him, which would have been 76, I guess, when I started with him, he was so screwed up with drugs. I mean, he had a road manager that when he got on and off the stage, he had to have 5 lines there. Now, I never have done coke in my life. I grew up in a country music atmosphere, and I guess if you got that was, but everybody else was smoking pot. As a matter of fact, they used to have cereal parties, him and his opening act, and it took me 6 months to figure out that there was a connection between the marijuana and the cereal parties. I had no idea. I'm up there in a, blue striped suit and tie and everything. And these guys are getting loaded on the bed and laughing. And if I said something, they'd laugh. They were just loaded. George had a lot of problems with drugs, but he kicked them. His big problem in life was his heart. His heart was fine. He had lousy arteries. So, a lot of people die every year from clogged arteries.
And kicking drugs back then, too, was a lot different because I also, in the past, had a struggle with drugs. And just from personal experience, I don't think people If you've never experienced it or you've never helped anybody that's been on drugs, you have no idea what it's like. It's a horrible experience for everyone.
Yeah.
Not just the person on it, you know what I mean? Everybody around them.
Yeah, definitely.
So, and especially with him, I'm sure he had I'm sure he had plenty of access to it. So, I mean, I'm poor, so it's a little different. But yeah, so you got to have a lot of respect for that, especially in that kind of environment.
Yes, definitely. So let's go a little bit more about you, Mr. Hamza. You were talking earlier and all that, before the show started about your experience in the country western world. So kind of tell us a little bit about that and your time with Loretta Lynn.
Well, I came out of Rochester, New York, and my father was actually a big band promoter, and there was a fellow named Hank Snow that was a Canadian artist, and he got hot, and they wanted to play him all across Canada. Except, you know what? Because there wasn't any radio around, there were no country music promoters around. And somebody dropped my father's name, and he wound up with the tour. And they went coast to coast and, you know, across Canada and did great. The interesting thing about that story is that Colonel Tom Parker was a manager, and he only had 3 clients in his life: Hank Snow, Eddie Arnold, and Elvis Presley. So Elvis Presley was the opening act on the Hank Snow show. He was getting $75 a night. My father was buying him his breakfast. And, you know, it's just funny how Hank was saying, you know, because some were walking out. But Hank says, you know, he's got a good ballad voice. If he would just stick to that, he'd be all right. And of course, he exploded and became the hottest thing of his time, period. But my father told me he was a very pleasant guy, very respectful, and all that, you know. So that's what started us in the country music. As country music started to grow in the middle 60s, we would put shows together, and, you know, they were doing good in the beginning, especially because the people had never had country music shows all day. They had country radio. It's radio that fuels country music. And in the South, they would have radio, but in the North, the Northeast, even out in California, they didn't have full-time radio. They would give them an hour a day, maybe 3-4 hours on a Saturday. Not enough to move the needle when it came to audiences.
Now you can listen to country music till your ears bleed now.
Yeah,
out there.
Yeah, with iTunes and all of that stuff, Spotify, you can download. Yeah, you can listen to all the music you want now. So yeah, back then on the radio, you were lucky to get a segment that was, you know, 3-4 hours long.
There was no other media for music then.
They would almost always be on a Saturday morning, and they would go like 5 to 9, 6 to 10. Well, who the hell was listening to that at that time of day? And it was a struggle. We used to do, I can remember doing a tour with Marty Robbins and Ray Price, where all I was doing was helping my father sell programs. And if he lost his ass on that tour. If they were drawing 500 people a night, he still lost money, but it was a big deal. Later, when the country music took hold and people were listening to it, it grew. And that show, Marty Robbins and, you know, Ray Price, they would draw 5,000-6,000 people. It was a different ballgame.
Yep, it was. Now, do you think that TV helped with the country music? Because I mean, like shows like Hee Haw, where you would have guests like Willie Nelson, and you had Roy Clark that was on there all the time with his banjo. Slim Pickens. I mean, there's just a ton of people that was on Hee Haw all the time. Do you think shows like that helped with the bringing country music to life?
Maybe. I'm not sure. Roy Clark couldn't draw flies if he was covered with molasses. That's the way it was. Not that he wasn't a good artist, and he could play Malaguena on his guitar and play the hell out of it, but he wasn't going to draw anybody. Buck Owens, who was his co-host, he had a manager that always used to charge about $5,000 a night in concert more than he was worth, so they'd lose his ass. But Buck was pretty smart, He would get on the phone with the DJs and say, when you're talking to your guys, tell them to bring me to town. But the truth be known, he couldn't pay for himself. He brought some people, way more than Roy Clark. And as far as the rest of those people, it was really funny. They would have a person like Archie Campbell that was making $300 a night as a comedian. Now he wanted 10 grand a night, and he still couldn't draw.
Wow.
Yeah. Funny world, One of my best friends was on that show, and he was one of my best friends because he was a fisherman. And, he and his wife got killed coming home from a gig. There was some people burglarizing his house, and he went in the house, and these two people shot him.
My God.
Sure and that is Grandpa Jones's best friend. What's his name? He was on Hee Haw all the time. I can't hear you.
Oh, I can't remember his name.
String Bean. Remember String Bean?
Yes.
That banjo.
Yeah.
There was a myth around that he didn't trust banks, and he always put his money under a mattress or something. And these two goons got it in their head that they would rob him, and he was coming home from a tour of some kind, and maybe a weekend, I don't know. But he drove in his house, and they were in there, and they shot him and his wife dead.
Oh,
I can still remember his wife because his wife used to drive them most of the time. And I got to say this about String Bean, one of the nicest people I ever met in my life. As a matter of fact, I had a show where it didn't look like we were doing business, but we were. It was like a policeman's ball. You'd sell the tickets, nobody would show up. And String Bean was making $300 a night. And he says, listen, you don't have to pay me tonight. And I told him, no, we're fine, String Bean. So he's a great fisherman from what I understand. I always wanted to take him up here to fish with me. He would have loved it in Grandpa.
Wow. So you were talking earlier that you spent 35 years in LA and you just moved back up to Maine. Do you get a lot of fishing in when you're up there?
Yeah, I used to come up here once or twice in the summer, but George wanted me right there, right in LA. And it wasn't a kind of a business that you could just walk away and take a month off, It wasn't like that.
Right.
So I spent a lot of time in LA. My time was, I loved the restaurants. I didn't particularly like the traffic or the
I bet.
But, they're so obsessed with the next level and all that.
See, I'm not a big city guy, so I can appreciate the Maine environment. Well, I'm from Pennsylvania. I don't know if you ever heard of Williamsport, Pennsylvania.
LA, you'll notice that all the streets.
Yeah.
That's because the people that built that city didn't want any part of each other. They give New York City a knock because the people are on top of each other, but the people in New York City are much more friendly than the people in LA. Now, if you told that to
Really?
90, 100 would say you're crazy, but that's the real.
All right. Wow. Well, Jerry, it has been a pleasure. We will definitely have to keep in touch. I appreciate you coming on here and giving us a little background. It was a wonderful interview. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you being in touch with me.
Definitely.
Bye-bye.
All right. You have a good day. Bye-bye.
Have a good one.
All right.
That was cool.
Yes. Well, folks, that was Jerry Hamza, longtime manager and close friend with George Carlin. Traveled the country western circuit. Didn't know that until today.
Yeah, I was gonna say we literally found out what, hour and a half ago that we're gonna have him on.
Yes.
So not a whole lot of time to prepare.
Yes. Anyways, quite interesting and all that, a lot of the things that Mr. Hamza had brought up and all that, how difficult it was for comedians back in the 50s and the 60s to, gain any kind of popularity, 60s, 70s.
The media, your choices of media were radio and then eventually television, and then you had to get on like a late night show or a special morning, or like you said, one of the shows that they had. Your opportunities were literally a fraction of what you have now. I mean, people now get famous on TikTok and YouTube. Well, you know what I mean? They don't even have to go to comedy shows. They can get famous right from the house.
Yeah.
If they're good. But yeah, back then, I can't even imagine the amount of work that went in, physical work. Like, you're not just sitting on your computer, sending a couple emails to a few people, but literally picking up the phone, reaching out to people to find out contact information. I mean, literally, you had to have a network, a literal network, not a network in the web sense, but an actual human contact type of network. You know what I mean?
Right.
You needed to know the right people at the right time.
Right. And think about this, the story you told about how when him and George broke down on the highway and they had to climb over. They had to climb over fences and, walk an hour just to make sure that they could get to the show, and the show must go on. I mean, think about that. No cell phone. There weren't cell phones.
Send a text saying, "Hey, we broke down. Come get us."
Yeah.
You couldn't call AAA. I mean, if you broke down, you better hope you're close to something.
I know. I mean, people today don't realize how good they truly have it.
I think the nice thing about having Mr. Hamza on was that we're almost like three different generations at the same time when it comes to, because you and me now use the internet and everything like that but you remember the time before the internet when you had to do things a different way.
Yeah. And I remember before computers. Today,
we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now on the internet because it didn't exist.
Right.
And even in the 90s and early 2000s, there was no mobile devices. You could get on the internet, but the internet was slow as shit. I mean, unless you paid ridiculous money for some kind of special modem, you know what I mean? And today, hell, I can make a video and post it on 5 different social media sites in like 90 seconds.
Yeah, I know. And I can remember back even way before not only the internet, but before even computers, okay, where a lot of households now have a computer. I mean, this is what I'm doing my show on, is a computer.
Yeah.
Okay? Back when I was in high school, I didn't have a computer. I had to go to school to learn how to work a computer.
Yeah.
Okay. And back then, the phones, I mean, you see the TikTok jokes and all that where, ask a millennial, what does
a fax machine do? Or how do you work a fax machine?
Yeah, how do you work a fax machine? What is dial up? What's a collect call? You know, I mean,
You give them a rotary phone, they'll look at it like it's a dinosaur.
yeah. Well, and those videos where they try to actually use a rotary phone and they can't make a rotary phone work because they just they don't have the concept, you know.
But that's hard for them. I think it's really hard for them to understand that because they've never seen a life without all this stuff.
Right.
And I think that I think there's a huge generational gap right now because of the internet and kids learning at a much faster rate than we ever did. You know, because I'm 45, my son just turned 18, my daughter's about to be 20, and they're light years ahead of where I was at their age as far as, you know, how to work. Like my son taught himself how to code. Yeah, stuff like that. You know what I mean? So
let me give you an example. The first time I used a phone as a child, okay, we didn't even have a phone number yet.
Get the fuck out of here.
We didn't have a phone number yet. You got on the phone. You got on the phone. And the operator came on, and you would tell the operator the name of who you were calling, and they would ask. They would then ask, "Is it the?" You know, they would say the person's name in this town on this street. Is this the person?
They put you through,
and they would put you through. And I was probably about 4 the first time I called my grandma on the phone and did that. And then I think I was probably about 6 or 7 that we actually got a phone number where you actually dialed a phone number. You
That's
know,
hilarious. I remember those because I had, I remember those.
And you dialed the phone number and then they picked up and then you could actually talk to them. But there might actually be somebody else on the line as you're talking.
Yeah, and people talking about privacy now. There was more of a chance of somebody being on the line back then than there is.
Yeah.
And then like today, the speed of information, like I can tell you, I know exactly when my Wi-Fi goes out. Because my son actually comes out of his room for once. That's how I know my Wi-Fi's out in my house.
Yes. There was times where you'd pick up the phone to go to dial somebody and there'd already be people talking on it. And it'd be just like, oh, well, let me just listen to what they're talking about. I mean, the distance that we have come, you know,
even just say the past 100 years, let's say since the Wright brothers invented the plane or the car, we'll say from that point till now, 120 years, we have grown by like science and technology had like, honestly, it blows my mind when I think about how far we've come like now. And it's part of everyday life. Like now, I even, it's funny, I wrote in my book, and one of the chapters is called Time to Disconnect, because I think people rely on their technology just a little bit too much. And I think it's healthier if we take a little bit more time. And I'm the worst one to talk about this shit because I'm on my phone all the time right now. Mm-hmm. But I proposed an experiment where the United States somehow, I don't know how it works because I'm not like that, but shut off the internet to the United States for 24 hours and see what happens. Oh, don't tell anybody we're going to do it as a social experiment. Just shut it off for 24 hours. I guarantee it'll be mass fucking chaos.
People would lose their fucking minds.
It would be, everybody would honestly think it's the end of the world. You wouldn't be able to get the news. You wouldn't be able to make phone calls. You wouldn't be able to get on the internet. You wouldn't be able to do jack fucking shit.
People would lose their minds.
You wouldn't even be able to see how much you have in the bank. Like everything is connected now. And I think people don't understand that our reliance on this technology these days is one of these days it's going to fuck us. It's going to backfire in our face because technology never works 100% of the time. I don't give a shit what it is. Like I always have like my S22 Ultra, my Samsung, best phone they make. Yeah, it don't work right all the time. You know what I mean? All it takes is one big old booger, and then everything is going to be.
Well, so, yeah. Let me explain this. You probably pay most of your bills online now, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. When I was a kid, we used to drive everywhere to pay our bills.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. I used to do that when I was younger, yeah.
Because you were scared to mail it because mail would actually get lost.
I had car payment, that shit happened, and I had to find out until a month later.
Yeah.
And that was before you could just look your bank account up on your phone. You know what I mean? You have to go to the bank. You have to go to the bank. You ever try and balance a checkbook? I guarantee you, oh my God, that's a challenge right there. I guarantee anybody under 20 years old to get a fucking checkbook and balance that bitch for a month. And compare it to their online statement. It was like, I could never do it. I was so happy when they invented bank apps.
I stopped balancing an actual checkbook about 2000, probably about 2011. So probably about 12 years ago. I actually, because again, you can go online and check it all, you know,
Yeah.
and it was very, very scary to do that.
It was at first, yeah.
You know, because I used to, everything was done in the checkbook, and I would compare the receipts.
My mom still balances her checkbook every month.
Yeah.
Receipts, like, sits down. She's starting to start. She's 79 years old, so, but she's old school. You know what I mean? She's just, and she's German, so she doesn't like change at all.
Right.
Like if I move something in the house, she freaks the fuck out. So like I've seen her balance a checkbook, and it comes down to like she has it down to almost the penny, and it's like, what? How? Not what?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I used to balance mine always to the penny. I mean,
well, you know what though? I'm thinking post like debit card. I'm sure when it was just sending out checks, it was a lot easier to keep track of shit. But once you start using debit cards and having like joint bank accounts with 2 debit cards,
you got to keep the receipt for everything that you get, and then you got to use that to take out.
And millennials don't think they're spoiled, man. Come on now.
I know.
Just think in 20 years or now. I mean, we're talking just 20 years ago. Imagine in another 20 years.
Yeah.
I don't know if you think our brains can comprehend, because we continue to evolve science and technology faster and faster and faster and faster.
Well, think about this. We go out and our big expenditure is buying a car or a home. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, 20 years from now, you're not going to be buying a car because nobody's going to own a car.
Yeah, it could be.
All right. Everybody's going to go to their app, and the car is going to pull up, and you're going to go do whatever it is that you do. And then a car is going to bring you home, and you're not going to own a car. What you are going to own is you're going to be buying a robot.
You're probably right. Yeah,
there's a robot's going to do your dishes, vacuum your house. It's going to take out the garbage. All these things that we still do is going to be done by a robot. You're going to come home and say, what's for dinner tonight? And you're not going to be speaking to another human being. You're going to be speaking to the AI robot that is going to give you suggestions. And you're going to say, I'll take number 3. And you're going to go sit down and do what it is you do, put on a show or whatever. And the meal is going to be cooked for you.
I have a question for all these smart people that are doing all this AI shit. Why, as a human race, are we obsessed with trying to make something that's fucking smarter than we are? Because if you think, I mean, you can't put limitations on something or learning once you teach it to learn. You understand what I mean? And I'm not saying this is like Skynet or whatever, you know what I mean? Judgment Day. But eventually, why would something... It's like we treat animals, we think we're more superior than animals because we have the ability to think and we have consciousness.
Right.
But what happens if we think that we can, if we build something that's smarter than us, that it's going to serve us? Like, it doesn't make sense when you think about it. Like, I don't know what the term would be, theological question or however you want to look at it. But why do we want to continue to try and invent something that's actually smarter than us? Because typically the smarter, more whatever you want to call it, it never typically works out. You know what I mean?
Well, it's going to happen. It's already happening.
They're building quantum computers now and shit. I mean,
and the question, because I've been in a lot of spaces on this, and basically the question comes down to, and I brought this up because it's just like they're going to become self-aware, they're going to become sentient. And my question to those people are they going to develop a consciousness, or are they going to develop an awareness? Those are 2 different things, very different things. And if they develop a consciousness, that's where we might be lucky that they don't wipe us out. if they only develop an awareness to where they're aware and they're doing computations and they realize that they can make themselves, they can make other ones like themselves,
Well,
they can connect to the other ones. What do they need human beings for?
that's what I mean. I mean, yeah,
Then that scenario comes true.
there's some smart humans out there, but let's be honest, man. There's a lot of not smart humans as well.
Right.
As we are seeing in our current state of fucking government. Sorry, I had to drop that in there, man.
That's all right. That's all right. Well, I'm going to let everybody on the show know that we're not so much going to focus on a comedian every week. What we're going to do is we're going to keep it with comedy and controversy. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at more of the controversy aspect of it and bring in comedians associated with the controversy. Jeremy and I have been talking and all that, and a couple of the topics that we want to cover, racism and homophobia. What do you say next week we go with racism? Let's cover it first. And
for me, that's a serious hot button. I mean,
okay, because I'm going to reach out to a couple people that I think would be really, really good guests on the show.
That would be. I would like to get a different perspective as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
that would be good because I get heated on the topic because I think racism is just small-minded ignorance. People that are afraid that other people are going to take stuff away from them, so they just hate them for no reason.
And let's get some good, real short clips. Again, with copyright stuff and all that, we're not going to be able to play any whole segments. So we'll get some copyright. We'll get some very short clips and introduce some different comedians and basically paraphrase what they're talking about and what it means.
We do 2 a week. Maybe you do one and I do one, like one of your favorites and one of my favorites.
Well, I'm thinking next week and all that we could talk about the one that you were just talking. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting the name.
Oh yeah, his name's Veer Das. He's an Indian-born comedian.
Okay.
And the guy, he's hilarious, but his jokes they have such a level of intelligence.
Okay.
And
next week we'll bring in some information on him and what he's talking about in relation to racism, and then I'm going to bring in Richard Pryor. So we'll talk about the comedy of Richard Pryor and say his name again.
Veer Das.
Veer Das. I don't know why.
It's only 6 letters, man. Come on, you got this.
I know. So Veer Das and Richard Pryor and their views on racism. And I'm going to bring in a guest or two. I got a couple in mind. I'm thinking like maybe Sarah Donahue or maybe Lana Quest, if not both. Yeah. And I'll also talk to them about some other comedians that they might have ideas about bringing in. So we might even talk about, 3 or 4 comedians at one time.
I'm trying to think because the homophobia one I really want to do because like we talked about earlier, let's be honest, it's not a fucking phobia. Phobia is when you're, somebody can't go outside because their anxiety is about to give them a heart attack. That's a phobia.
Right.
Homophobia is just you're a bigoted dick and you're just pretending you're just labeling yourself to make yourself feel better.
Right. So we'll do that one after the racism one because the racism one I know I can put together quite rapidly.
Yeah.
The homophobia one, there's a few people that I want to reach out to. I want to reach out to some people that are, part of the LGBTQIA community. I myself, who is pansexual, can talk about how long it took me to come out of the closet and express the fears that I used to have with, what pansexuality is and the fears I had with it. Because back then the term pansexuality didn't exist. It would have been.
No. See, my thing, and I, whatever you want to be, like, I don't like labels. I don't like the labeling of sexualities. I don't like the labeling of genders or race at all. You know what I mean? I think it's to the point where we're just fucking people. You know what I mean? We love who we love. We like who we like.
Right. I understand the label aspect where you have the issue, but there's also an identity aspect to it.
There is. Right, there is. I just feel that, and I see this a lot on TikTok, is not people like, you're not alienating yourself, but people are trying to use that label now to alienate you. They're, like you talked about before, weaponizing labels. Like, people are taking these labels that are created for identity purposes, and then they're turning around, weaponizing it, and then spewing out hatred.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's where I think.
And we'll kind of get into that a little bit when we go into the homophobia segment and everything, because there's some perspectives that I want to get out there. Because, like I said, when I knew that I was, at the time, I probably would have labeled myself bisexual. Okay. When the reality is I'm pansexual. And again, that identification, I don't believe was existent back then. I don't think that people knew how to identify it as, but I was scared to come out and talk about it because, again, the fear that if I did talk about it, people would kill me or beat the hell out of me,
Yes.
And
it sucks that still is something that you have to be afraid of. Well, you think we've evolved enough that I don't see why the fuck it matters. Like, I don't give a shit who you like, who you love. It's not like, and the thing I don't understand about homophobia, it's not like it's something you can catch.
Right.
You're not gonna rub up against a gay person.
Well, a lot of it has to do with ignorance and stereotyping and creating a fear.
And it's never based on personal experience.
Exactly.
That's the bullshit I hate about stereotypes. They're never fucking based on personal experience. They're based on hearsay, bullshit, and then rumors online nowadays. Or somebody heard somebody say something like, oh, fuck, I'm going to agree with that. That makes sense to me.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's such, fuck, it drives me nuts. It drives me absolutely fucking crazy.
I know.
The amount of hatred that still exists based on pure ignorance. And I think for me, what I realized is I used to have a lot of hate inside, but it was not hatred towards other people. It was hatred towards myself because of the decisions I made. And when I had my idea for my book, I think was the day that I let go of all the things that I hated about myself. You know what I mean? And then once I let go of that hatred, and I think this is one of the things I try and push forward in my book, is once I let go of that hatred of myself, I literally just saw this gigantic picture of life, meaning, purpose. I had been focusing so long on hating myself that I forgot there's an entire world around me that could maybe benefit from the things I've been through.
Yep.
And I think people are taking that inner hatred now, and they're thinking it's okay to portray that outward. You know what I mean? Now, if you want to be a bigot in your head, in your house, whatever, you know what I mean? It's your house. Do whatever you got to do. If you're going to be an asshole, be an asshole. But nowadays, it's become way too fucking regular and way too fucking normal for hatred to be out in the streets. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I did a video about, remember I did the video I told you about TikTok called I'm a Patriot, You Are Not. Like, if you think you have to go to a drag show armed literally for a fucking zombie apocalypse, what in the world could be possibly less threatening than a drag show? The only thing I could think of is like a fucking box of kittens.
I tell you,
that's about it.
I've been to numerous drag shows, and
but they're threatened by
that's fun as hell.
And what people don't realize, they're just like, oh, they hate us. They hate. No, you know what? They're threatened by you because of something they hate about themselves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they're not going to tell you that. But those people, they hate everybody. They hate themselves. They hate their neighbors.
Again, they listen to ignorant propaganda and they fall for it. And that's just what it is. That's the basis of all of this hatred is ignorance.
It really is. It really, and you know what though? But it's being perpetuated on a massive scale right now.
Yes.
You know what I mean? They're actually giving people hatred ammunition these days online. And people are getting paid very fucking well to spread fear and and uncertainty,
Yes.
which causes fear. You know what I mean?
I guarantee you, because when I was in Northern California, most people thought in the area that I live, thought I was like them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when they would say something that just did not go along with my belief system and my morals,
right?
I would share that with them, and they did not like that.
I get into so many fucking arguments about stuff because people look at me the same way. I live in a very white area. Okay, we have a strong white population. We have a strong black population, but we don't have a strong white and black population.
Right.
And people assume in my area, because I'm white, they can just say ignorant shit in front of me.
Right.
Not thinking for a second, my mom's a fucking immigrant from Germany who came here in 1973.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And they don't think that both of my kids are Mexican. They don't think that both of my kids are gay. And they just look at me and say, because, well, he's white, he must be, you know what I mean? He must think the same thing I do. And I fucking hate the fact that people just are so vocal about their ignorance. You know what I mean? They're literally, and online, man, the amount of there was one video online where the one response was, this kid literally thought that Indian people moved to this country and the government gave them convenience stores and businesses. That is what they truly fucking believe. I wanted to throw my phone. That is the level of ignorance. People don't understand. They're like, oh, yeah, there's ignorant people out there. You don't understand the depth of ignorance until you look at some of the comments people make.
Right.
And they will show you true online, especially because there's a level of anonymity. Let me say that right. I'm a little stunned. So let me take a second there. But yeah, so people will flex what I like to call their internet muscles. You know what I mean? And they'll say horrible shit online because they know you can't get a hold of them. You know what I mean? You're not going to do anything to them. So the level of ignorance, but these people, and what I realize is they're not just being hateful people. They believe this stuff.
Yes.
They believe they're doing the right thing right now for this country by going to drag shows. They think they're standing up for freedom and liberty, and they call themselves patriots, and the shit pisses me off because my father was a patriot. You know what I mean? He was a soldier too. He was 22 years, served in 2 fucking wars, taught me how to be a good person, to respect everybody. Unless they're an asshole, then you treat them like an asshole, regardless of where they're from. You know what I mean? And I feel fortunate that that's the way I was raised.
Yep.
And that's what I believe, though. I believe everybody has value, you know what I mean, unless they show otherwise. And that's how I was raised. But so many people are raised the opposite way. And I realize that now, that these people heard this shit their entire lives growing up. See, I was taught how to be a good man by my father. And he's a patriot because he taught me how to, he loves people. He wasn't a people person, but he didn't hate people for petty reasons like race or religion or whatever. And I thank God that he taught me that. You know what I mean? I do. I'm really happy that he taught me that. And I want to pass that on to other people, but getting through to some of these people, I don't think is ever going to be possible. I think there's a level of ignorance these days that is going to be unreachable.
Yeah. Bryce is on. Did I miss Jerry? Yes, you missed Jerry. He was on for the first half hour of the show, Bryce.
You're only fucking 54 minutes late, buddy.
Yes.
Bryce, I miss his spaces since I got fucking banned from Twitter for not breaking any rules.
Yeah, but yeah, Bryce, he was on for the first half hour, and again, it was a time limit thing, so catch the replay. Catch the replay. It was a good interview, quite interesting, quite educational too. You know, so you're gonna love it. You're gonna love it.
The amount of people that guy's met is just unbelievable. Like, he's probably the most famous person. I was just thinking the closest I've never met a famous person. I was like 20 feet away from George Lucas once, but I wasn't going to go out and be like, hi, like an idiot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm a fan.
My 20 years in the casino industry, I've met a lot of people that are, you know, famous, whether it would be music, movies, whatever. It's the first few times you meet some famous people, and it's just like, oh my God, oh my God. And after a while, it's just like, oh, nice to meet you. My name is Paul Sisler. How you doing?
There's a few people I think I would freak out if I met, like Barack Obama. I have this weird request. I don't know if fuck it. Like I want to smoke weed with Barack Obama. That is one of my life goals.
And I tell you right now, I don't smoke weed because I have an allergy to it, but I would be willing to smoke weed with Barack Obama.
Could you imagine how fucking cool that conversation would be?
And go through the hell, you know?
Oh my God, are you kidding? That would be the most awesome conversation ever.
Yeah.
But no, there's certain people I think if I met, I would freak the fuck out. But yes, most people like, you know what? Yeah, you're famous. That's great. But I'm poor and you're not helping me at all. So you know what? Fuck you. But there's, you know, I mean, there's some people that are out there that I'd probably freak out about, like some of my idols. Like there's like people, oh my God, like Kevin Hart, Dave Chappelle, like people like that. I would like go bonkers. I would be like a screaming teenager if I met them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will tell that story another time, Bryce. I'll tell that story another time.
What?
Yes.
Why did you have to do this at 4:56? You couldn't throw that in at 4:32.
We'll say it.
Throw that in now. No, come on.
We will bring that one up on another time because it's a long story and we will tell it. So, anyways.
I'm still looking at it like, get the fuck out of here. That's like that would be like if somebody asked me, what's the coolest shit you've ever done? Like, this is how boring my life is. I'd be like, that's Michael Jordan. I've seen him. That would be like the highlight of my life. That's hilarious. But you're a lot bigger than me too. And Jordan whooped my ass. So yeah.
Almost got fired for it. But again, another story for another day.
Yeah, that'd be a good story.
Yes. All right. Well, everyone, thank you for participating. We appreciate it. And remember.
Yes, please. Next week, we're going to definitely be tackling racism. So I hope everybody joins in. We need conversations, comments.
Definitely. All right. Remember, everyone, be kind, be happy, and may good things come your way. Thank you.
Bye.